Hello there, watching Al-24 Midnight News coming to you live from Algiers. And to the headlines. Mali's military government plans to hold a referendum on a new constitution next month to pave the way for democratic elections. Due to ammunition shortages, the leader of Russia's Wagner military group threatens to withdraw his troops from the Ukrainian city of Bakhmut on May 10. And as for the first crowning in 70 years, Britain is making final preparations for the coronation of King Charles III on Saturday with the presence of several world leaders. Saying it was now sufficiently under control, the World Health Organization lifted its highest level of alert on COVID-19 pandemic on Friday. Hello again and welcome. Despite the multiple ceasefire declaration, fighting continues in Sudan. Heavy gunfire echoed around Al-Khartoum on Friday as civilians are trapped in the Sudanese capital. The battles have killed hundreds and sent more than 100,000 refugees fleeing abroad and turned residential areas of Sudanese capital into war zones. Following a meeting in Nairobi with German Chancellor Olaf Scholz, the Kenyan President William Ruto on Friday said that the two leaders discussed the conflict in Sudan and its spillover in the region. Kenyan President William Ruto called for the immediate end of conflicts in Sudan, while fighting continues to rage in Khartoum despite the agreed truce.
We agreed on the immediate need for unconditional cessation of hostilities and humanitarian aid access and protection of civilians. We underscored the need for the international community to support Kenya, IGAD, and the African Union in the ongoing efforts to resolve that conflict.
In Africa, still Mali's Transitional Council announced on Friday a referendum on a new constitution for Mali that will be held in the West African nation on June 18th. Government spokesman Colonel Abdoulaye Maiga read out a decree on state television saying the country was called upon to vote on the draft constitution in June after missing a previous deadline of March 19th.
The Electoral College is convened on Sunday, June 18, 2023, throughout the national territory and in the diplomatic and consular missions of the Republic of Mali to vote on the draft constitution attached to this decree.
The Strasing Committee of the Police Cooperation Mechanism of the African Union AfriPool has accepted to register Algeria's request to obtain the status of permanent member of the Executive Board of AfriPool. The request made by the Director General of National Security, Farid Benchir, will be presented for approval during the proceedings of the General Assembly to be organized in October 2023. The High Commissioner for Planning in Morocco revealed in its latest report a frightening figure in terms of job loss and unemployment. Figures showed that there is more than 2 million unemployed in Morocco, as the latest increase more than 80,000 unemployed during the first quarter of the 2023 compared to the same period last year. High Commissioner for Planning in Morocco said that unemployment rate jumped to 12.9% on March, as youth were most affected with a rate of more than 15%. In Morocco, still Amnesty International has called out of the Moroccan authorities for violating the United Nations standards minimum rules for treatment of prisoners, also known as the Mandela rules. More with Mohammed Khattan in this report.
In a statement on World Press Freedom Day, Rawia Rajah, Amnesty International's interim deputy director for the Middle East and North Africa, stated that the Moroccan authorities have arbitrarily arrested dissenting writers and journalists.
The Moroccan authorities have long targeted dissenting writers and journalists with arrests, and today is a day to remember all those imprisoned for their writing. To deprive imprisoned journalists of pens and paper is punitive, unnecessary, and a deliberate attack on their freedom of expression.
Rawia Rajah called on the Moroccan authorities to end this cruelty and to release those who have been imprisoned solely for exercising the right to freedom of expression.
We call on the Moroccan authorities to end this cruelty against journalists and academics. They must release journalists and academics who were imprisoned solely for exercising their right to freedom of expression and ensure that access to newspapers, books, and writing materials for prisoners is not arbitrarily restricted.
The imprisoned writers and journalists have been subjected to solitary confinement and arbitrary censoring of books, notes, and manuscripts. They have also been prohibited from writing, studying, and receiving letters from family and friends. Rida bin Uthman, a writer and member of the Moroccan Association for the Defense of Human Rights, has been held in prolonged solitary confinement in prison since September 2022.
Everything is permitted, from humiliating visitors to banning simple things like a fountain pen for writing. Anything related to politics is forbidden.
The son of 80-year-old Mohamed Zian, a human rights lawyer, academic, and former minister for human rights in Morocco, said that despite his old age, his father was put in an isolation cell, adding that the Moroccan authorities often do that with intellectuals as a form of torture. To kill an intellectual, you isolate them so that they cannot communicate with other people, he stressed. The Makhzen regime is continuing to turn a blind eye and a deaf ear to human rights and the rights of journalists, activists, and politicians, triggering waves of mass protests and worldwide indignation.
Algerian Foreign Minister said in a statement that the Algerian head of diplomacy, Mr. Ahmed Attaf, met with the British Secretary of State for Foreign Affairs, Lord Tariq Ahmed of Wimbledon. On this occasion, the two sides reviewed bilateral relations and prospects for strengthening them in the areas of energy, trade, security, and culture, expressing satisfaction with the promising development of these relations. This comes as part of Attaf's official visit to London to represent the President of the Republic, Mr. Abdelmajid Tebboune, at His Majesty King Charles III coronation ceremony. Similar of thoughts, millions of people across the UK and beyond are preparing to celebrate the coronation of King Charles III, symbolic ceremony combining a religious service and pageantry.
In a ceremony full of pomp, pageantry, and solemn religious significance, and after 70 years of waiting, King Charles will be finally crowned at Westminster Abbey on Saturday, with Britain declaring a bank holiday weekend so that as many people as possible can enjoy the festivities. Royal fans from all over the world are already gathering on the streets of London, decked out in flags, crowns, and homemade regalia. The United Kingdom's capital city will be packed on Saturday, as hundreds of thousands are expected to be celebrating King Charles' coronation, lining the route of the procession as he makes his way from Buckingham Palace to Westminster Abbey and back again. The coronation is due to be celebrated with dozens of street parties across Hull, suggesting that a city once branded one England's most Republican might be having a change of heart. Final preparations are now taking place for the event, almost 7 decades after the coronation of Queen Elizabeth II in 1953. The king has been hosting dignitaries from around the world at Buckingham Palace ahead of his coronation tomorrow, as a huge security operation is underway. While people are gathering along the route of tomorrow's procession in central London, bunting has gone up and commemorative ornaments are being sold in shops as people look forward to celebrating King Charles' crowning.
The World Health Organization declared on Friday that COVID-19 no longer represents a global health emergency, a major step towards the end of the pandemic that has killed more than 6.9 million people, disrupted the global economy, and ravaged communities. The WHO's Emergency Committee met on Thursday and recommended that UN agency declare an end to the public health emergency of international concern, which has been in place for over 3 years.
Yesterday, the Emergency Committee met for the 15th time and recommended to me that I declare an end to the public health emergency of international concern. I have accepted that advice. It's therefore with great hope that I declare COVID-19 over as a global health emergency.
Russian Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov declared that Wednesday's drone incident at the Kremlin was a hostile act and Russia would respond with concrete actions. Russia has accused Ukraine of firing drones at the Kremlin in an attempt to kill President Vladimir Putin and said that the United States was behind the alleged attack, which Ukraine has denied and the White House has dismissed.
It was clearly a hostile act. It is absolutely clear that the Kiev terrorists could not have committed it without the knowledge of their masters. We will not respond by talking about whether it's all casus belli or not, but we will respond with concrete actions. I would like to say it once again. We have plenty of patience. There is a saying, Russians are slow starters, and so on. Speaking about Washington's attitude, I took a note of the statement by Antony Blinken, who said that the US would not dictate to Ukraine how it should defend its sovereignty. That probably says it all.
The leader of the military group Wagner on Friday threatened to pull out Wagner forces from the embattled Ukraine city of Bakhmut next week, accusing Russia's military command of starving the group of ammunition. This comes as the Russian defense minister visited his troops to ensure they had all the weapons they needed. Nabil Khazini.
It is described as a paramilitary group operating in line with the Russian forces. It gained its fame, especially during the war in Ukraine, and particularly in their remarkable presence in the long battle for Bakhmut. But surprisingly, the boss of the Wagner group started a war of words against Moscow and threatened to pull out from the strategic city of Bakhmut. To justify the decision, the group's leader evoked heavy losses and a lack of ammunition.
My guys will not suffer useless and unjustified losses in Bakhmut without ammunition. Therefore, on May 10, 2023, we will leave the settlement of Bakhmut.
Moscow says it has seen these unexpected statements, but can't comment on them, as they concern the special military operation. On the battlefield in Bakhmut, fighting is still raging. The Ukrainian military reported that fresh Russian reinforcements were being brought into the city, as fierce clashes were also reported in Marinka, where Russian forces attempt to improve their tactical positions.
На Донецком направлении штурмовые отряды продолжали вести наступательные действия.
On the Donetsk axis, the assault units continued to carry out offensive operations in the western part of the city of Artyomovsk. The airborne troops were providing their support and hampered the enemy forces on the flanks.
These last events come as Russian Defense Minister Sergei Shoigu inspected troops and equipment to ensure his forces had all the weapons they needed.
In sport now, and in the CHAN of Under-17, despite the difficult game against Congo, that ends with a positive draw. Algeria qualified for the quarter-finals of the Under-17 African Cup of Nations that will challenge Morocco in the North African Derby in Constantine next week. The winner will simply go to the World Cup and they will gain a ticket, although the visitors dominated the first half, reaching even up to 60% possession. They finished in the third in the Group A with 2 points, while this result granted Algeria a second place after Senegal first, whom they will face Nigeria in the next round. Now, moving on to Europe, Victor Osimhen's goal in the second half for Napoli, their first Scudetto since 1990, following Thursday night's 1-1 draw at Udinese. Napoli's last two championships were won in 1987 and in 1990 during the time of Argentina star Maradona, for whom the stadium is now called. After the primes with Maradona, the Italian club went bankrupt and played as recently as 2006 in Serie C. Although they have 3 Coppa Italia trophies in the last 11 seasons, Napoli fans have been longing for Scudetto for 33 years in order to achieve this ultimate goal that now become a true story to be told. And to close our news, now let's have another round over the international news all over the world.
5 aircrafts carrying supplies have been sent to Port Sudan by Kuwait, Qatar, and the International Committee of the Red Cross. The spokesperson of the Sudanese Health Ministry reported that 4 out of the 5 aircrafts, which were carrying food and medical supplies, landed at Port Sudan International Airport on Friday. It's worth mentioning that this catastrophic situation is a result of 3 weeks of fierce fighting between the Sudanese armed forces and the paramilitary forces over the country's ruling.
French police clashed with hundreds of black-clad anarchists in Paris and other cities during union-led protests against President Emmanuel Macron's increase in the retirement age as workers stage Labor Day rallies across Europe. Emergency services used water cannon to pull out a fire which blackened the windows of nearby flats. One officer was badly injured when he was struck by a fierce projectile. The latest Macron retirement age reform was a move that caused his popularity to drop to levels not seen since the Yellow Vest crisis.
More than 133 men and women were sent back to Guatemala from Valle International Airport in Harlingen, Texas. All of the migrants, according to U.S. Immigration and Customs Enforcement officials, were expelled from the country under Title 42 and were all from Guatemala. Title 42, implemented by former President Donald Trump, allows U.S. authorities to send migrants to Mexico without giving them a chance to request asylum.
A man has been arrested after the second mass shooting in Serbia in a week, killing 8 people and injured 14. The attack happened just after midnight near a village about 60 kilometers south of Belgrade when the shooter opened fire from a moving car. The arrest was preceded by a massive manhunt involving more than 600 police officers, according to local media. This incident comes after a boy killed 9 people at a school in Belgrade on Wednesday, which led President Alexander Vučić to announce a list of new security measures to improve gun control in the country.
Ladies and gentlemen, thank you ever so much for being with us. We reached the end of our news bulletin. For more updates, you can follow our social media platform as it is seen in the screen. And all I can say at the end, take care of yourself and good night.